So, is the Windsor framework a win? Some of your thoughts coming in. One viewer says, Rishi has sorted it. Well, there you are. Another says, the DUP won't accept anything which results in a return to power sharing under a Sinn Féin First Minister. Well, if you believe that, there's almost no point to the Assembly existing at all, given demographic and political changes that have happened in Northern Ireland. Gabby says, looking at the Windsor framework, it seems like the EU got Sunak to sign us up to dynamic alignment. Well, Gabby, whether you're right on that or not, I don't know. We're going to get the legal text. What is clear is the situation is better for trade, of course, because it was absolutely ghastly. What is clear is they've made a concession on excise duties, on VAT, but in the absolute knowledge that this government doesn't want to cut any taxes at all. In fact, it's rather keener to put taxes up, and they expect Labour to be in 18 months' time. But what really vexes me is the fact it's actually called Windsor at all, and the role of a certain King Charles. Well, Camilla Tominey, as advertised before the break, joins me. Windsor, why?
Yes, it's a really good question. And what's muddied these waters is the fact that there was a suggestion that he was going to meet Ursula on Saturday. And that looked odd, didn't it? Because you'd then have been mid-negotiation. It's one thing to say he's going to meet her because she's an incoming leader and it's only the polite thing to do, and they're going to have tea at Windsor Castle because that's what the King does. Well, that's the guidance from the palace.
But hang on a second. She's not a head of state.
No.
She's head of a bureaucracy called the European Commission.
Yeah.
It's actually Monsieur Michel who is the senior political figure within
Understood.
because he's chairman of the council.
Although it's difficult to make any comparisons with days gone by on this particular issue because all of the negotiations have been done in Brussels and announced from there. So we haven't really had a situation with an incoming being here at this moment. Interestingly, the guidance from the palace is that the King was pleased to meet any world leader, that's how they've described her, if they are visiting Britain, and it is the government's advice that he should do so. So we've also had this slight tug of war today between the palace saying that they're acting on government advice, and then a government spokesman sort of suggesting that it was down to the palace. In my experience of royal reporting for however long I've been doing it, it is the government that issues the advice as to whether the monarch should meet somebody who's coming into the country.
Yes.
And they're also making the point, the palace, that they have already had discussions about other matters, that this isn't related to the protocol issue. But of course, people looking at it will go, hang on a minute, well, the timing seems to be a bit off.
Why is it called the Windsor? Why is it called the Windsor?
This was the other thing that I tried to probe earlier. You know, was she always meant to be doing it in Windsor? What's going on? And there was a suggestion that they wanted it to be close to London for logistics, but not in London. Can't quite understand that either. But I think the confusion has been caused by this suggestion, and it is correct, the Mail on Sunday did it, that there was going to be this meeting on Saturday and then it was pulled. And I'd say that it's extraordinary to have thought of the idea of the King meeting her if the negotiations were still ongoing.
Yeah.
Less extraordinary that he has met her. I know you're really opposed to this. But the argument that the government's instructed him to serve her tea so they can discuss Ukraine and environmental issues, I mean, there's a degree of credibility to that, but you're suspicious of the timing.
Well, I mean, there are a couple of points here, aren't there? The first is the government could advise the King that it's correct to meet somebody. He doesn't take instructions, direct instructions from the government, so ultimately it's his choice whether to meet or not. Here's my worry, Camilla. Are we beginning to see Charles's real political beliefs?
We've already seen, this is the trouble though, you can't put the Charles genie back in the bottle when it comes to the fact that he was accused while he was Prince of Wales of sending black spider memos and of, quotes, interfering politics. He's in a different role completely now, and his people have always insisted that he will rule differently to how he behaved as the longest serving heir apparent in history. Let's look at it the other way though, Nigel. If the government had asked him to meet her and he had said no, that would have been a real interference in politics. I mean, that would have been quite controversial, wouldn't it?
Yes, but he could have said to them, do not use the name Windsor. You know, I'm happy to meet her, but don't use the name Windsor in this agreement, because very clearly in the minds of the public, one is being linked with the other. He could have done that.
But you might not believe them, but they are stressing that that is geography-related rather than royal-related.
Utter, total baloney.
That's their argument.
And I know from the past, because I was there twice when Charles visited the the European Parliament, spoke in the European Parliament, praised the European Parliament, praised the institutions of the European Union, and actually asked for the institutions to have more power. So, I know that's what he thinks, but I fear that today there are many people, not just the unionist community in Northern Ireland, but many people who absolutely want Charles to succeed, who will be very upset by this.
Well, also, I think it's not a good look to be dragged into the political fray in this light at all. The other thing that slightly complicates matters, of course, is that their first tour as King and Queen Consort is to Europe and not the Commonwealth.
It'll be Paris and Berlin.
We think so. It hasn't been confirmed yet, and I await details, which I think are coming next week. Now, again, that's raised some eyebrows, because obviously the idea of him even taking over as Commonwealth head of government was controversial after his late mother. I mean, he was unanimously appointed, but we know that there are Commonwealth countries flirting with the idea of republicanism, not least after Barbados went their own way, and there's flirtations with it in Australia at the moment with a left-wing government in control. So you might have thought that the priority would be to visit one of those nations first. You could then make the counter-argument, they're in their 70s, there's a coronation coming in May, they don't want to go on a long-haul trip at this stage in the game. But again, that's adding to this idea of them packing a bit more than a kind of soft power punch when it comes to their international diplomacy.
I think I'll forgive them that, because, 10 weeks to the coronation, as you say, they're in their mid-70s. Final quick thought, switching gear to politics. Sunak, the presentation's good. Legally, it's not worth a rubber beans, in my opinion. We'll find out for certain in the next couple of days. The Eurosceptics have been routed, I think, ever since the appointment of Jeremy Hunt. The DUP may not accept it. They may accept it. I doubt they will. This was Boris Johnson's big moment. Ironic that the man who sold this terrible deal, who said there wouldn't be a border in the Irish Sea, if any businessman had a problem with checks, to give him a ring. He saw this as his way back, didn't he?
Yes, although I think that path to a comeback via this route is narrowing. Lots of mood music. We heard from Olivia earlier talking about the idea of David Davis supporting this deal. Well, of course he does, because he doesn't support Boris Johnson returning to victory. So there's a lot of politics at play here. And I think if Sunak does land this with the Brexiteers, then it certainly does decrease Boris Johnson's stock. And let's be honest, that's exactly what Number 10 wants to do right now. They don't want a big blonde Boris in the background waving the drum for Brexit.
I think, despite my reservations about the deal, I think that becomes much less likely today. Camilla, great stuff. You're doing a Sunday morning show for GB News. Tell us more.
Indeed, back in this studio, 9:30 to 11, with big name guests.
Sunday mornings.
As ever. Sunday mornings. Tune in.
If you haven't seen it, I watched it yesterday. It was very, very good indeed. On that note, we'll take a break. More discussion in a couple of minutes.